members that if they were unable to participate in person, that we would make a recording of this and post on the board portal so that there would be an opportunity for them to hear other questions that were presented in a more detailed presentation to follow up on what happened last week. So thank you to the innovations team for joining us once again. I will not prolong it. On the next slide, you'll kind of see our presentation guidelines that are very similar. We'll take breaks throughout the presentation to offer board members who are on the call the opportunity to ask questions. The questions and answers will be moderated by Kenitra Mathis, who is our programs and evaluation manager and has been working closely with the innovations team. Again, on the next slide, you will see kind of the guidelines that we'll work through. And with that, I will turn it over to, I think, Dr. Aubrey Culp to start with presentation of the Year 4 evaluation and the qualitative report. So with that, Dr. Culp, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shara, for the nice introduction, and thank you all for joining today. So, as Shara said, today I'm going to be talking through the Year 4 evaluation report. We're going to do a high-level overview of the findings, and we'll have time throughout for questions and at the end for discussion. So, this year, we talked to prospective and TA and community parents, teachers, and providers to understand their awareness of CPP, their perspectives on quality, their barriers to preschool enrollment, as well as their satisfaction with their preschool promise experience. We used a mixed methods evaluation approach to collect their feedback on those key questions. So we conducted focus groups with 76 preschool parents, teachers, and providers, as well as surveys, and we collected 260. And our participants represented 75 unique preschool programs across the community. So our first set of questions was around awareness of CPP and perspectives on quality preschool. So here we see that our prospective parent group, almost half had heard about Cincinnati Preschool Promise prior to completing our survey. And the top way that they heard about CPP first was through friends and family, with 12.2% reporting that. And the majority of providers, or 85.7%, had heard about CPP before completing the survey. Next, we wanted to look at quality. So you'll see in this graph here, prospective parents and providers' perspectives on quality. The top three areas were a safe environment, social skill development, and kindergarten readiness. And we heard that from parents that all of them really value a quality early educational experience for their child. We also asked a similar question to the community parents, and you'll see it in the graph here that our tuition assistance parents are in blue and the quality improvement parents are in yellow, and they also prioritize social skill development and kindergarten preparation for their children, and find that quality early education experiences are important for their children. And our focus group feedback really aligned with these survey results that we received. And in the second bullet, parents commented that quality education is getting their child ready for kindergarten and learning the basics, and also learning social and emotional skills, as well as the educational level of their teachers. This next section is about barriers to Cincinnati Preschool Promise participation and preschool enrollment. So we first wanted to ask our prospective parents what their concerns were about preschool enrollment for their 3- and 4-year-old children. And the top area was safety of the facility at 40%, and 38.2% of parents were concerned with the teacher-child ratio and behavior management. We also asked prospective stakeholders about this list of barriers to preschool enrollment on the left in the purple, we have our prospective parents, and on the right, prospective providers and their thoughts about what parents think are barriers to preschool enrollment. And the top barrier reported for both was financial and cost of tuition. And for the prospective providers, they also rated transportation and other caregivers' schedules and parent work schedules as in the same way. Additional enrollment barriers reported by parents were 37.3% said the preschool operating hours were a barrier, and 19.1% that said that the location of the preschool was a barrier. Other comments from parents during focus groups included things around discipline problems, and that parents are working from home, so they're not sending their children to preschool. Additional barriers to access reported by providers, 42.9% said that children may have a disability, as well as the lack of trust and having safety concerns. And then 35.7% said the access to quality options was a barrier to accessing preschool. Similarly, we see for our TA parents and QI parents, barriers to accessing preschool. For our TA parents, the top 3 areas were lack of quality options. They couldn't afford preschool, and some issues around trust. And then the QI parents, the top area for them was that the preschool was too far from their home or work, followed by lack of quality options, trust, and transportation coming in at 28.6%. And here we asked prospective providers what's impacting their participation or stopping them from applying to be a CPP provider. And the common response was about knowledge and awareness, but there's also some needed information around what their understanding about what they qualify for in terms of the services and benefits available through Preschool Promise. Some reported that they are very busy, and so that's a challenge for them to participate in Preschool Promise, as well as their location in the community. And for satisfaction with Preschool Promise experience overall, the results are very wonderful. Everyone is highly satisfied with their experience. So first we look at our tuition assistance parents, and over 90% of parents were satisfied or very satisfied with the options that they have for preschool, the tuition assistance received, the application process, and their provider communication about Preschool Promise. This next slide looks at communication with TA stakeholders and showing responses for satisfied and very satisfied. So in blue, we have parents, in orange, our teachers, and in green, our providers. And overall, everyone is highly satisfied in the areas of in-person, email, phone, and newsletter, and flyer communication. And we do see somewhat of a dip for the teachers, but that's one of our recommendations, is to communicate more directly with the teachers. That is a preference that they share during the focus groups. Next, for the supports that tuition assistance teachers and providers received, overall high satisfaction in the areas of professional development, coming in at 89.7%, and also with step up to quality supports and teacher and staff incentives, with over 70% being satisfied and very satisfied in those areas. And our quality improvement teachers and providers also rated their satisfaction with their CPP experience, and coaching came in at the top. both teachers and providers are very satisfied with coaching, especially in the areas of coach following up with them, their frequency of contact, their level of expertise, and their responsiveness to them. And for providers, we also see that 80% were satisfied or very satisfied with the professional development that they receive, the teacher and educational resources, and communication. And just some quotes that really highlight how satisfied our community teachers and providers are with CPP. A TA teacher said that at my center, we are constantly learning, training, and using the professional development. Our parents appreciate that and value that we are open to continuing our professional development. A QI provider said, CPP's guidance helped me to focus on my goals. I just got my 3rd star and I couldn't have done it without their help. And a TA provider says that CPP provides opportunities for me to better myself as an educator, director, and my school. And providers are also very pleased with their partnership with CPP. And so just some quotes to highlight that here. I think that the support that I've gotten was great. It was needed, and I wouldn't have got to where I am without it. This is a wonderful program. I have seen many successes with children in low-income families who have taken advantage of this program. It's truly a blessing that this is available for our children. And it's a great partnership. I appreciate the support CPP has in place to help enhance our childcare program. Thank you. And so looking forward with next steps and opportunities for CPP, expanding Step Up to Quality supports to ensure that all community providers can maintain and achieve high quality, enhancing communications about CPP benefits. So communicating directly with those teachers, as I'd mentioned before, versus having directors share some of like general updates with them, and continuing to reach out to prospective stakeholders about the benefits of CPP. Provide supports and tools for at-home learning. We heard that especially with COVID over the last year, students missing a lot of school, that parents and teachers were searching for additional supports for at-home learning. And developing opportunities for teacher and provider recognition. We heard from QI providers and teachers that they desire additional recognition for their work. And then additional considerations. So these are considerations that may take more strategic planning, they're longer term, may need more funding and partnerships to achieve them. So expanding supports for teachers and providers to achieve their educational aspirations. We heard from many teachers that they've received supports and have completed their education, but there's still opportunity to reach more teachers and providers who wish to do so. Innovate and deliver programs and supports to help working families and single parents. So we've heard some of the challenges and barriers that working families are experiencing in terms of the other needs of their children, their work schedules, before and after care. So helping those working families with getting their child to attend preschool. The next consideration is to think about the best ways to meet all children's needs, specifically those with health issues or disabilities, and to make sure that they're able to get connected to the provider and resources that meets their child's needs. Offering teachers and providers supports for improving their communication with families. This is also about, we heard from parents that they want like weekly updates about their child's progress, or an update when a child completes an assessment, how that's going. So helping teachers and providers share that type of information with their families. And then finally, to broaden professional development opportunities, our teachers and providers have a variety of backgrounds and experiences. So offering a diverse array of professional development opportunities and at different times to meet their scheduling needs and their interest. So I'll pause there for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Culp. And I apologize, everyone. Zoom is giving me an error message for my camera. So it was working before, but you can't see me now, but I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you for that more detailed overview again. And I would like to turn it over to Kenitra Mathis to present and facilitate the Q&A sessions. So we've had several questions show up in the chat.
I almost said good afternoon, but it is still morning. So good morning, everyone. We did receive a couple of questions. So at this time, Ms. Marcia, if you still want to have your questions, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, I was reacting to the data around barriers and mentioned trust. So do we know what that means? And can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So in the focus groups, parents are concerned about background checks for staff and trusting providers that they have the experience. So they tend to trust providers that have more years under their belt, that they can get feedback from other parents who have been with them.
Okay. You had a second question related to paperwork?
Yes, I did. So there was a comment in there about, I think it was on the provider side, about being too busy, too much paperwork. And I think I've heard this before. So I don't have a clue or have a feel for how much it is. Is it something that they experience just when they enroll in Preschool Promise as a provider? Do things get easier as time goes by? You know, is there an opportunity to operationalize it so that it's easier for the providers? I know anytime you're doing grants and money's coming from things, it's paperwork. So I don't know if it might be more directed towards the staff to answer.
I can offer a response and say that it is frequently a concern that we have, and every year we work on how to streamline that. We do, one big step that we made is a common application, so that if you are a QI provider, you don't then have to fill out another application to be a TA provider. And we are looking for ongoing ways to do that, but it is not only at the enrollment time, it is ongoing because we require certain documents related to licensure to continually be maintained. The challenge with that is those documents expire on a staggering schedule for most providers. What they've asked us for is for a checklist that we're developing to help them remember what those dates and reminders are, but it is very paperwork intensive, and we have not found the best way to automate that. So if they are working with ODJFS, for example, on the TA side, they have a scan that does an automatic attendance capture with a tablet, right? We don't have an automated process like that. You actually have to fill attendance out on a sheet, and some people do it by hand and then send it back to us. So we have a lot of pieces that we're working to refine with a reduced cost. We'd like to be efficient and effective, but also cost savvy. And so we take that to heart and try to work with providers on how we do it. And we found some interesting ways that were out of necessity during the pandemic. Sometimes a camera phone shot of a document is just as good as a scan. So we're looking for innovative ways on how we do that again, because we don't want that to be the barrier. Never should have an administrative barrier to participating in the program and helping families.
Right.
All right. Thank you for that response, Shara. The next question is from Laura Sarah Grant.
I guess my first question was about, have you looked at what is the tuition costs? What is the average tuition cost of a quality of our TAs? What are, if they were not being subsidized by us, how much are they asking for from a parent who is above 300%?
I don't know that answer. So
because some of your data was saying that that the quality is above too expensive. And so I was wondering what that expense kind of threshold would be.
mhm.
And
That's a good question, and something that we can, so that was a survey item, so we didn't have a chance for them to elaborate on that, but that's a question that we could definitely ask in the next year.
I just, because it kind of goes along with that complaint of it's too expensive. That was one of my questions. And it might be because I work with the Workforce Development Council, but what do you feel is broadening professional development opportunities? Because I feel that CPP is doing an awesome job.
Mm-hmm.
And then we at Workforce are trying to fill in any of the little things that we feel might need to be there. So I'm wondering what your views on that are.
So that was a smaller group of people who made that comment, and tended to be people who are at larger centers who have master's degrees. So they were looking for paid opportunities or different times of different ways that they could participate versus in person, doing online only in the evenings, self-study, and also their interest areas varied. So and I think this is a result of the pandemic, wanting to be trained on like mental health, how to help parents around mental health challenges. And they also mentioned parent engagement and behavior management. So those are some of the areas that were mentioned that providers would like to see offered. And I'm not aware, they may already be. This focus group and survey took place earlier in the year.
I will also add, Dr. Culp, that has been consistent in what we've heard in an ongoing basis from provider council, as well as surveys that we've taken. And I think it was an interest before, but the pandemic has demanded that there's even more an interest. And we are working currently to connect both providers and parents with those resources. It was also a topic that came up for board discussion at our annual meeting. And so we owe a report back on what we're doing to try to make those connections for providers.
Thank you.
I had another question, if I may. I know if Laura's done. There was a slide. You are okay. She's jumping up and down. There was a slide where it talked about barriers, and one of which was transportation or access, I believe it was. Where is it? Yeah, lack of transportation. These were QI parents. So do we have an idea if we were to map it back to a certain neighborhoods or certain geographic locations? Is it because there are not many in that particular area, or what else could that data tell us?
So we didn't do that for this particular group. And
okay.
You can see that we have only 7 people who actually responded to this. So this number can't be generalized for the entire QI population.
Yeah.
So we didn't hear a lot about transportation from parents or needing transportation from parents during the focus groups. Mm-hmm. So in our other presentation, we talked about how far our high quality preschools from people's homes, and that it doesn't seem to be an issue. So this is something that we'll continue to look at and need to dive deeper into in the coming year for those people who are still reporting that transportation is a challenge.
And even in that number on that slide, the too far from home / work. And I appreciate the fact that the sample size is small, but that's like 42.9%. And maybe I'm just looking at too much data all at once, but just wondered if that told us anything as well in terms of access.
Yeah, I can jump in and just talk about the research that we did. So like Aubrey mentioned, when we had the reach and access discussion, the maps that we were looking at when we were talking about density of population, proximity to high quality, was all focused on the TA side, right? So I think we see a big difference between TA and QI in terms of any transportation issues or distances from home. So I think if we did a similar analysis looking at where the QI sites are and where the children are, we may see that there are less QI providers in those areas, which are driving up those numbers. That's something that, like Dr. Culp said, we're going to look into further next year to expand that study. And, you know, part of the question that we weren't able to answer the other day had to do with, you know, open seats at certain preschools. So although we know there are providers in the area, we don't know that answer. We also know that parents prioritize different aspects of care over, but you know, here we're asking about any of these factors that might impact their satisfaction and what are the barriers. So I think that's a great question to explore more on the QI side of things, as we had kind of focused on the TA landscape. But yeah, we'll continue to look into that going forward for sure.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I'm sorry, my camera's not working either. This is Monica Mitchell. When we also did the reach and access, we also noticed that when we looked at kids who had enrolled in preschool and those who hadn't enrolled in preschool, we found that the average distance to the preschool was a little over 2 miles, which doesn't sound like a long way if you have a car, but it is a long way if you don't have a car. So transportation studies, including those in Cincinnati, we know that if you're 2 miles from anything, including a grocery store, you can actually have to take 2 buses and it can take you an hour to get to a grocery store, even if you only live 2 miles away. So that's just something else for additional context.
Can you tell me more about the demographics around the lack of trust? What are the issues? And is it any particular neighborhood, economic status? On the slide about barriers, the issue of trust.
So this was a survey, so we did not have the opportunity to go back and ask them what they meant by lack of trust.
Okay.
So that's something that we can, if that's an area of interest, we can add that to our survey and to our focus groups in this coming year, and to get a better understanding of what trust means for these different parent groups.
Yeah, because I think that, when you look at the first two, it's understandable. Lack of options, can't afford it. Lack of trust. What is the issue around trust? Trust that your child won't be safe, or your child's not going to be educated? That's a big number, a big percentage.
I think that safety is probably the big aspect of lack of trust, as we see that safety was one of the top rated areas for what quality means to parents. So if they're, not able to trust a preschool, then that would be a barrier to their enrollment.
Yeah, I think the next time around, I'd like to see some actual data.
And I think that something on providers and maybe our end is that they have to understand that a provider needs to have a pretty severe, deep background check to be in a licensed center. So I feel that that's something that maybe the whole preschool world needs to make sure that parents know that I'm taking my CDA students next week to get their background checks, and it's pretty severe. I mean, so it's a pretty deep background check.
Thanks, Laura. That's a great point.
I guess my question to you in terms of this, given the timing of when this was done, is any of that lack of trust could be related to COVID concerns in health and safety? I also would want to consider that when we look at it in the upcoming year of deeper data, if that has a different layer in terms of trusting your children in any outside of your home environment with the potential for COVID exposures as well.
Thanks, Shara. Yeah, I'll make a note of that as well. That wasn't something that we were able to clarify through any of the feedback that we got in the focus groups, but it definitely could be part of COVID, could definitely be a part of their lack of trust.
There are no additional questions in the comments at this time. Are there any additional questions from anyone on the line? So I have to chuckle. I know Laura usually dismisses all of the meetings, so she has officially said no by shaking her head. So does that mean no one has questions?
Just that I didn't have. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm just keeping myself muted because I have lots of noises here.
I know, I'm just being funny. Does anyone else have any questions?
Just one other thing I wrote down is as Dr. Culp was going through her presentation, there was on one of the slides it talked about a barrier for providers around work schedule hours. Let's see.
Yeah, that was, are you speaking?
Yeah, that one. That's the one.
So that is their perception of what they think are barriers for parents. So that's not a provider's barriers, but that's what, so they were speaking to what they think are barriers for parents who have not enrolled their child in preschool.
Oh, because of work, their own schedule.
Because of their work schedules and the schedules of their other caregivers, providers believe that parents weren't able to get their child to enroll in preschool.
That's interesting. I guess that's stuff that has been verbalized to them. I just find that curious why that percentage is so high. So, okay.
Well, I would think that if this is what the providers were thinking. So it's the providers' preconceived ideas about parents and their concerns. And just, are we not open, because some centers are open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but maybe a parent works from 4 to 9. And so we could not service them because of our hours. And I think that that's what the provider's saying, because I think there's a fair number of providers that are 24 hours or do the extended time in the day, but not a whole lot. So I think that maybe when we're talking with our providers, they're more of a traditional time than a 24-hour time. And so that might be why they have that idea.
Okay, it just struck me that percentage was so high, and I couldn't remember who had responded to that. So,
Sure.
Yeah. With our workforce needs changing so much, that might be something to consider, or not for us to consider, but just wonder how many, if there are people out there that are considering offering some different schedules for care and for preschool, quite frankly. Yeah. It's probably more of the care piece though, because kids need to go to bed. Night.
I see there's a comment in the chat too from Ms. Perkins.
Ms. Perkins, you want to ask your question?
Sorry, and my apologies. I'm listening in while working with my children with school. One of the things I wanted to talk about when y'all was talking about lack of trust, I stepped away for a moment. Sometimes from my experience, the lack of trust comes from families like who are spreading, talking to other people saying, don't attend that center or don't go to that provider. And, you know, they're giving their opinion that's stopping those families from trying it out on their own.
Thank you. That's important context.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think sometimes it's even bigger than that. Sometimes families are just saying, don't even try childcare, period. And I think that's what some of what we're combating against is sometimes these age-old kind of beliefs that are maybe counterproductive to us trying to promote the message that there's benefits to children attending preschool.
Are there any additional comments or questions? If not, Shara, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our board members who attended, posed questions to have a rich discussion with innovations on the qualitative piece. We have one more session this afternoon at 1 o'clock on teacher and wages. Please know that this session will be posted to the board portal if anybody would like to review it. And this does not end your opportunity to post questions and make recommendations. At the end of October, we'll be doing our deep dive with innovations as we prepare for the year 5 evaluation. So we want to make sure that we get all of those comments, ideas, and recommendations from you. And thank you for joining us this morning. And for those of you who will see this afternoon, we look forward to that. And if not, have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.